And welcome back to the show. Approximately 1 in 10 children enrolled in city, district, or charter schools were identified as homeless during the 2019-2020 year. This in the Bronx, 1 in 6 students classified as homeless. These statistics were uncovered in recent data research that was done concerning homeless students in New York City. Advocates for Children of New York's mission is to ensure a high quality of education for New York students who face barriers to academic success, focusing on students from low-income backgrounds. They advocate for school stability for students, particularly students experiencing homelessness and students in foster care, so they can remain in their school even if their living situation changes. And here to provide some information is the Policy Director and Advocate for Children of New York, Randi Levine. And Randi, good to have you.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
When we look at those statistics, they're actually startling. As I said, when I looked and I saw it, I was like, 1 in 10 children enrolled are actually homeless. I remember a time when that was never the case. And as we know, these numbers are what they are now, but they also continue to grow. So give us a little bit about where we are and the work that you're doing.
Well, over the past decade, we have seen a significant growth in the number of students who are homeless. And that number tops 100,000 for the 5th consecutive year. We did see a modest 2.2% decrease from the prior school year, but we have to remember that the closure of schools happened due to COVID-19, and that likely made it harder for schools to identify students who became homeless. And so there's reason to doubt these numbers, and they may in fact be even higher.
Yeah, and we talk about doubting it and maybe even higher. We have to assume that it's going to be higher given the fact that we're in COVID-19 now. There is a moratorium on evictions. We know that's going to be lifted probably in January, and we'll see a whole lot more people probably be in the place of being, potentially homeless. I know that you've got some advocacy that you're doing with regards to wanting the city to do some things. Talk to us about how you think the city should be responding, particularly to this particular crisis.
Well, we're very concerned about the scenario that you just laid out, the potential surge in the number of students who are homeless. Given how high those numbers already are, this is extremely alarming to think about. And really, in New York City, no child should be homeless. But with the situation we have right now, the city, state, and federal governments all need to work together, both to address the affordable housing crisis, but at the same time to work on the education of children who are homeless. Because we know that education is key to breaking the cycle of homelessness. We want to ensure that every student gets a high quality education, regardless of their housing status. And so there are a few things that we're asking the city to do right now. For starters, most students right now are learning remotely most of the time. And that's harder to do. It's harder to learn from home if you don't have a permanent home. And so the city has to ensure that every student who is homeless has the technology they need to participate in remote learning. It's December, but we're still hearing about students who don't yet have the iPad they were promised from the Department of Education, and other students who have iPads but can't get them to work. So it's important for the Department of Education to ensure every student gets a device and connectivity, and that they get the tech support they need to actually be able to use that device to access their classes.
Yeah, you're confirming what we've heard. I mean, I've been asked several times to bring it to light, whether there's students, families who've gone through the situation of not having the adequate amount of laptops to be able to deal. And that's for a person that's not homeless, right? So let's take the homeless population right now. How hard is it to make sure that they're equipped? And then when you are homeless, how hard is it to really get that quality education, given the fact that your home stability is not there?
Well, even before the pandemic, students who are homeless in New York City had abysmal educational outcomes. And we're worried that the pandemic has only magnified those challenges. As you said, remote learning has been immensely challenging for students who are homeless. The city did provide iPads that had data, so they work just like your cell phone works, because most shelters don't have Wi-Fi. And so they relied on that cell phone service in order to be able to access classes, but it wasn't that simple. So a lot of the shelters don't have Wi-Fi, but in addition, many had connectivity challenges with the cell phone service. So we heard about student after student who was just struggling to get online in the first place, or whose connectivity was really shoddy. And unfortunately, if it takes you 20 minutes to access a 2-minute lesson, a lot of times you give up. And that's what we can't have happening right now. So we need the city to expedite installing Wi Fi in the shelters and making sure that every student has a device that actually works and can get them online. In addition, for families who want in person learning, we want to make sure that they have that option as well. And so the city should offer full time in person instruction for all students who are homeless whose families want that option. Right now, middle and high school students have no option for in person learning at all. And we're hearing about students who had been going to school and now have no place to go. And we want to ensure that all of them can go to school if their families want them to and can get online if not.
Well, Randy, tell me this from your perspective, what do you view as your biggest challenge as of right now?
You know, it's hard to point to one challenge. I think that there really are a series of challenges. So, technology is a concern that we just hear again and again from families who are homeless, and we need to resolve it. We're also very concerned that there are students who are homeless who just haven't been showing up to class, haven't been getting there either in person or online. And in fact, we now have attendance data from the spring that shows us that students living in shelter had the worst attendance of any student subgroup in New York City, more than 13 percentage points lower than students as a whole. And so we need the city to be doing more to ensure that students who are homeless can get to school, whether it's online or in person. So let's use the attendance data that they have and follow up with the families whose children haven't been getting to school. Figure out what the barrier is. Is it that the family had an iPad that broke? If so, let's replace it right away and ensure that the student can get back online. Is it that the student doesn't have a place to go during the day? If so, maybe there is a Learning Bridge childcare program available that can provide the student with the space that they need. Is it a mental health concern? Let's connect the family to a community-based provider that can help address those concerns. Whatever it is, we need to figure out what the barrier is, identify it, and address it so that students don't miss out on this entire year of school. We also need the city to start planning for recovery. What happens when all students can return to school? Having gotten off track, and we're going to need a major effort to give these students the education that they've missed out on and help them get back on track as part of the city's recovery from COVID.
Yeah. You know, we're hearing from a lot of people that this year may potentially be a lost year, particularly in the area of education, because of the multiple challenges. Agree, disagree? How do you shape that out to be?
Very concerned that the equities this year have only grown, and that for some students, there's no question that they have lost a tremendous amount of learning. They're also missing out on the social emotional supports that school provides. So we are extremely concerned. You know, imagine a first grader who is still in the process of learning to read and used to go to school every day and have a teacher to work with them on reading. And now they're trying to access online learning with a device that doesn't always connect in a room where they have multiple siblings at different grade levels with different needs, all trying to access online learning at the same time. It's just such a hard situation. Similarly, for a high school student who had been going to all of their different classes and interacting with their peers and their teachers and really saw school as a place of stability and a safe haven, and now has had that taken away. So I think you're right, and there are a lot of students who have just missed a tremendous amount of education and support this past year. And that's why it's going to take an equally tremendous effort to help with recovery and get them back on track.
Yeah, I want to take a minute and take a look at some of the numbers that I have with regards to homeless students in the Bronx. And I'll give you, and you have them, but I just want our viewers to have them. 37,908 students attending school in the Bronx were identified as homeless during the 2019-20 school year, more than in any other borough. Approximately one in six students in the Bronx is homeless. That's more than any other borough. District 9 in the Bronx has the highest concentration of students who are homeless in the city, with 1 out of every 5 students that are homeless. 1 in 3 New York City students experiencing homelessness attend school in the Bronx, even though 1 in 5 students citywide are in the Bronx. So I guess the optimum question is, Randy, what is going on, particularly here in the borough of the Bronx?
There is such a high concentration of students who are homeless in the Bronx. And we know that the Bronx is home to districts that have very high need, that there's a big lack of affordable housing in the city. And Bronx has a disproportionate number of homeless shelters. And so we're seeing this very high concentration of students in the Bronx. And so there in particular, we need to do more. And before the pandemic, over the past few years, the administration had taken some positive steps. For example, after a large advocacy effort, they added about 100 Bridging the Gap social workers, who are social workers who work in schools that have these high numbers of students living in shelter. And the social workers are focused specifically on meeting the needs of students living in shelter, making sure that they can get to school every day, and giving them the counseling and the support that they need. And so this is an important program. And I think things would be even worse right now if we didn't have those staff members in place. But there's still so much work to do. Most students living in shelter still attend a school that does not have a Bridging the Gap social worker. And so there's no one in their school community who's specifically dedicated to meeting their needs. And I'll also say that right now, even with the current positions, because of hiring freezes and budget cuts, the city has more than 20 positions focused on students who are homeless that are vacant and that the city is not filling. And we need each of those positions to be filled right now at a minimum, at a time when there are so many students, especially in the Bronx, who need this additional support, when we're seeing so many students who are homeless, who are not attending school in person or online, and when there's so much learning loss taking place. So we encourage the city as one step to fill those positions right away, because we need all hands on deck this year immediately.
I even hate to ask the question, but everything's political, right? So, given the fact that we are going to see a political election coming up, there's going to be in New York City the race for mayor. How much can we see possibly the tables turn, a more attention given, more dedicated to this particular issue? Because a lot of candidates are talking about the issue, but yet and still, when it comes to results, not always seen. Could we potentially see 2021 more tangible results, given the fact that, first of all, it should be done in the first place, let's be honest. But secondly, that it is a political year and people will probably try to politicize it, but in the end, it could potentially be a win for those who need the most service.
Homelessness and both the housing, access to affordable housing, as well as the education of students who are homeless, should be major center points of this mayoral campaign. And we hope that everyone running for citywide office, as well as city council offices, will take a look at this data and work with us and other advocacy partners to think about what we can do to ensure that every student gets an excellent education regardless of where they live. Because we know that New York City schools have the ability to be a major piece of breaking the cycle of homelessness, but only if students are getting to school every day, are learning to read, and are able to use education to take them wherever they want to go next. So we really look forward to working with all of the candidates to focus more attention on these challenges. And when they get into office, to focus more attention and resources on meeting the needs of these students.
I've talked with city officials before, and they've said off camera and off the record somewhat that, Daren, there just simply isn't enough resources to be able to deal with the city's homeless crisis, and particularly when it comes to education, and particularly when it comes to some of the things of hunger. And I look with like perplexity because I say, in a city that has these great resources available, how could it be that we could have the issues that we're having at such greater magnitude?
The city has vast resources, and I think it really is a question of priorities. And we have seen some good steps in this administration, but need to take it to the next level as we move into the next administration and make a commitment to providing an excellent education to all students who are homeless. And again, looking at the broader problems of homelessness. And then at the same time, we definitely don't want to let the state and federal governments off the hook either. They have a role to play. And I will say right now, we know that Congress is debating the next COVID-19 relief package. And we hope that our elected officials, both in the state government and in Congress and the federal government, keep students who are homeless in mind, because it takes a lot more resources in order to ensure that students who are homeless can get to school and be safe in school during a pandemic, and to ensure that they can access online learning if they're learning from home. And then, as we've already discussed, there's going to be the need for a major education recovery plan. And we know that students who are homeless are among the groups who have had the most learning loss and have missed out on so much academic and social emotional support, have experienced so much trauma on top of trauma that they have already experienced for many students. And we need the city, state, and federal government to all work together to put forth the resources needed to help these students.
So if people want to access this information, particularly the report that gives us this vast data with regards to homelessness and the homeless crisis that we're facing, how can people get their hands on that?
We encourage everyone to go to Advocates for Children of New York's website, www.advocatesforchildren.org. And Advocates for Children houses a project called New York State Teaches, which provides technical assistance to school districts and schools and families and shelters across the state with respect to the education of students who are homeless. And so they have a website that has a lot of resources specifically around the education of students who are homeless in New York. And they have an info line as well that families who are homeless can call with questions about education, as well as schools and school districts can call if they want to know how to help support students who are homeless and are facing barriers to doing so. And that number is 1-800-388-2014. Advocates for Children also has an education helpline that parents in New York City can call with any questions they have about education, whether or not it relates to the education of students who are homeless, from the time children are born through the time they graduate high school. And that number is 866-427-6033.
Well, Randi Levine, thank you so much. We're going to leave it there. Great conversation, great work that you're doing. And hopefully as we get to 2021, that we can see a lot more of our city's homeless population, particularly our children, be better served. Thank you so much for enlightening us, and thank you for giving us this valuable information.
Thank you so much for focusing on this population of students who often get overlooked.
Yeah, we want to see them served. Thank you so much. All right, Randi Levine, our guest here on the Social Justice Forums. We encourage you to stay with us. We do have more show and another guest coming up right after this.